long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host. And I'm joined, well, by nobody this week, at least in the introduction portion of the show. For those of you that missed the news last week, I had a baby this week. On Monday morning, my wife and I had a baby boy. We named him Logan, and we are celebrating our new arrival and getting into the routine of life with an infant. So we decided that this might be a good week for us to take off. So we're not going to have a new episode of the show as normal for you folks, but I still wanted to release something. I still wanted to give you something for your Thursday morning fix. Fortunately, a few weeks ago, my cousin DJ DiDonna and I had sat down in front of some microphones and we had talked about the new Stand miniseries over on CBS All Access, what is now called Paramount Plus. We are both avid Stephen King readers and lovers of all things King, and we both really, really love The Stand. So we were very excited for the show. So I got him on the phone and we talked for an hour or so about The Stand. And I had this in my back pocket, and I thought this was a pretty good week for it. So I hope you folks enjoy this little bonus episode, and we will be back, and we hope you will join us as we return to our regularly scheduled programming next week. But until then, take it away, pre-being a parent, Scott. All right, everyone, we are here with our special guest for this week's episode. It is my cousin, DJ. DJ, how's it going?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am good. I'm very excited to sit here and talk with you. You are here because today we're going to be talking about the CBS, or I guess it's Paramount Plus now, miniseries of The Stand. We're going to be talking about all 9 episodes. And I brought you on here for a couple reasons. Well, the first is my normal co-host, Matt, hasn't read The Stand yet. So obviously he did not watch the series because we're going to be reading that book one day. And we didn't want to spoil him on it with spoilers, very bad miniseries before he got to talk about the book. And the other reason is you are kind of the reason why I'm so into Stephen King in a kind of not normal way. I mean, you really like Stephen King and you introduced him to me, but I don't know if I've ever told you the story actually.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Yeah. So I was at your house in Colorado when we were children. I have no idea when this was, but we were kids. I was visiting you. I think it was when I was there after a Boy Scout jamboree thing or something. You had something to do that day. That's all I remember. You had something to do that day. So I was like stuck at your house all day during the day. And that's the first day I played Half-Life because you had Half-Life on your computer and you showed me Half-Life and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And the other thing you did was like show me your book collection, specifically your Dark Tower books. I don't think they were all out at this point. No, they couldn't have been. I think this is only the first 4 books in the series were out at this point. And I read like half of The Gunslinger while sitting in your room bored and then played like half of Half-Life. And then I didn't get back to the Dark Tower series until years later, but it was my introduction really to Stephen King. So
That's
you're
awesome.
Indirectly responsible for that.
That's awesome. All those years fed into me supporting our Patreon. So it was a long sell.
It comes around. It's a wheel, right? The car is a wheel. So how did you get started with Stephen King? Where did it come from for you? Was it your parents? Where does that come from?
That's a good question. I think the first time I remember reading his short stories and scaring myself, but actually I feel like both of our introduction to Stephen King, and it might have been your sister and I, but back when I lived in Texas, my parents' living room was around the corner from my bedroom and they were watching the It miniseries. My parents, your parents, and we were like crawling out of my room into the hallway to kind of like see it because you could hear the scares. And I think that's kind of what ingrained It and Stephen King into my brain. And yeah, over time, just read all of his short stories, a lot of his books. And in high school was introduced to The Dark Tower by my buddy Adam. And, got to follow that series all the way up until its awesome film representation as well. So bad movies are a wheel.
Yeah. It's so funny you talk about that. I had completely forgotten about that It story, but as soon as you said it, like I immediately got a picture in my head of us doing that, of us kind of hiding behind the couch, watching and listening to It, which scared the shit out of me. Yeah, I did not read It the book until I was much older, probably because of that that fear ingrained there. But you're totally right, that happened. I
Yep.
forgot about that. Man, it's hard to explain to people who weren't alive when that series came out, like how culturally huge that miniseries was. Like my dad does not like scary movies, so for him to be sitting there with y'all, I mean, he was probably complaining about it if I know my dad, but to like everyone watched that miniseries, everyone did.
Were people afraid of clowns before that, or was that like the nexus of people thinking clowns were scary?
It might have been because I feel like the reason why King went with clowns in the first place is because people like clowns, and so that's why he picked clowns for that story in the first place. And then the book obviously didn't help with that, but then the movie is what really made it go mainstream. All right, so The Stand. You've read the novel, right?
I have. It's been a while.
And you've seen the 94 miniseries as well.
Yes.
And I've done both those things as well. I haven't seen the miniseries in a very long time, but I read The Stand a while ago, and then again a couple years ago, I think now. I'm doing this, I don't know if I told you, I'm doing this chronological Stephen King reread project where I'm reading every single one of his books for the first time or on a reread from the first to the last. And I got through the 80s already. Actually, The Stand was The Stand? I can't remember. I'm through that part now.
I feel like it's 79. Yeah. And he just released a new book, so I feel like you're never going to catch up to him.
I mean, I'm getting there slowly. I'm in the early 2000s right now. I'm currently reading Black House, and then I'll switch to his new book, and then I'll go back to my I'll get there. I've been doing it for 3 years now. I'll be done in another 2 or 3. I have faith.
It just kind of reminds me back to high school when I was reading The Dark Tower. When he started publishing them again, I was in high school, and then he got hit by the minivan, and everyone was like, obviously, oh man, too bad for his family. But their first thought was really, oh my God, he's not going to finish the Dark Tower series.
Yeah. And I mean, one of my favorite things about that series is that he works that into the story itself. He works that sentiment that everyone had, that
so crazy,
he's not going to finish the books, into the books themselves. Yeah. So, I mean, The Stand, I think it's one of my favorite novels of all time. I think it's definitely at the top of my Stephen King novels and just generally one of my favorite books. And I enjoy the 94 miniseries for what it is. I don't think it's perfect. I don't think it's impossible to tell a story this big and sprawling over, I think it was 4 episodes of that thing. But I really, really like the story, and I was really, really excited for this miniseries. Were you following the news on this thing at all, besides just like they were making one?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I think that, Google saw me search for it once, and then it's just feeding me The Stand information every morning. So I was following it pretty closely. And, like, as any Stephen King fan who sees film adaptations come up, their like first thought is, man, this is awesome. And then immediately followed by, they're definitely going to fuck this up somehow.
Yeah, and I guess before we get into our overall thoughts, I think, following the course of making it, it made me very excited. Like some of the casting decisions, I was like, okay, I don't know about that. Some of them I was really excited about. I think Skarsgård playing Randall Flagg, I was very excited about. It seemed like the developers knew what they were doing, but I was very worried with this whole idea that like it's just going to be a limited series, just going to be one episode or one season, 9 episodes, and we're going to do it. And I just like, to me, the story always felt like if you're going to do it, you could do it in over seasons. Like you could do 3 seasons on this thing easily. And their choice to not do that made me a little concerned, but I went into it. I think that's the important thing I want to say before we get into the show itself. I went into this thing really excited and really, really, really wanting to like it. And I think all 8 episodes until the very final episode was me like really trying to convince myself that no, I actually am enjoying this. And I don't think I was. So what overall, what did you think of this miniseries?
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone who isn't a huge Stephen King fan, right? And I'm still getting dragged in the muck by a couple of friends who I took to see the Dark Tower movie. Same thing. You're like, oh my God, wasn't it Matthew McConaughey was the was RF, and then or the Man in Black and Idris. I mean, it was just an epic cast. You know,
Yeah.
the director. I mean, you're talking about the guys who did Lost, right? You have an awesome cast, and you're like, this is going to be, and it's during the pandemic. Like everything is lined up to have this be amazing. We talked about this earlier. I thought that Alexander Skarsgård was his brother, Bill Skarsgård, from what's the name of the series that's set in Maine, but not quite Stephen King?
Castle Rock.
Yeah. So I thought that they were like it was all connected in a way that was even cooler. I guess Owen Teague is also in it, right?
Yes.
But yeah, just disappointing. I mean, I think that they just had so much going for them, and it fell flat. It just didn't inspire. It wasn't scary. It didn't inspire, a ton of thinking about the pandemic in a different way, and it felt like it just didn't do justice to the source material. But that's how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I think the place to start this conversation is the most daring adaptive choice that they made on this thing, which was to tell the story in like a flashback narrative thing. Yeah. And like here, like there's part of me that gets the reason for this, right? Like you're adapting something, you want to signal yourself as different. You want to show this is different from the other adaptation. We're doing something different. And the easiest way to do that is to screw with the story structure. And like, I think it's an interesting idea in principle. I think it's a disaster in practice, and it just completely messes with everything. I mean, like 9 episodes is already too few to really spend enough time with the incredible cast of characters that this story has. And then you start telling the story out of order, and you just kill any sense of momentum and pace and tension and all these things. I mean, what did you think about it? Because I have talked to some people that thought it was interesting, at least at the beginning.
I feel like I forgot that it was so jarring until I went back and watched the first. So I watched the first episode again today in preparation because, and it started, and I was like, wait a minute. In my brain had even rearranged it so that the guy escaping from the military compound was like the first part. It was crazy. Like the first thing is what's his face, Harold Lauder, like seeing bodies in a church. I mean, it was totally crazy. So I think my mind even restitched the way it was filmed to make it how it should be. I just think, maybe the argument could be that people would be too weary because we're in a pandemic to see some like New York City is in a pandemic thing, and they would switch it off. But otherwise, I mean, that's a cool tension, that voyage out west and the selection and that's great, right? And so it ends up just kind of giving short shrift to the whole buildup, and you just get more of the middle, which is just kind of like doing some narrative work, but it's not that interesting,
Yeah, I mean, I think the first book of The Stand, like the first book of that book, where we kind of see society slowly collapse, is like some of the best writing ever. And it's so like The Stand is one of my favorite books. That is probably my favorite part of that book because it's so well done. And to just kind of choose to fast forward over that was really disappointing. I think to me, it fails to get you to care about any of these characters at all. Because like there's nothing to grab onto at the beginning. Like I think the one thing that I do think the show does very well is tell the story of Harold Lauder, because they basically made the decision that he's going to be the main character of the show, right? At least for the first 7 episodes, roughly. He's basically the protagonist. We see most of what happens through his eyes, and it's really invested in his character arc and the tragedy of his story.
I do think that Harold's such a more interesting character than Stu, so I'm glad that they did that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was one of the best characters.
Yeah, I mean, here's the problem with it though. They didn't change the ending. Like Harold is a great character. I think he's very, 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 very well performed in this miniseries by Owen Teague. But I think the way he has such a sad, depressing ending that has nothing to do with the final climax of the show, that making him kind of the default protagonist of so much of the story, and then giving him the same ending that happens in the books, and then we just move on to the climax without him, just feels weird. It feels like it doesn't connect. And so like, if they were going to go this route, if they're going to frame the story of Harold, they should have changed the ending up a little more, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's kind of Games of Thrones-y, and I don't hate it. I guess if I could choose to see a character go to the end of the movie, I would rather have seen Harold and then like Stu kind of died in the ravine. Spoiler alert.
Yeah. I mean, Stu has always been just kind of a bland, like it's like, you never hate Stu because he's just a good dude, but like, he's not the most fascinating person to read about. And I think Marsden did a fine job at Stu. I liked him. But I mean, I think Glenn is so much of a more interesting character, especially in the series. Tom Cullen was fantastic. Like, everyone else around Stu is better than Stu, and that kind of hurts him as well.
I mean, the other thing about Stu, and I might be misremembering, but it's just, there's nothing complex about the character, right? I mean, he doesn't have any challenges. At the end, he's like, "What happened?" And Franny's like, I was tested, and Stu's like, "Huh." You can tell the guy's like never never had that happen to him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a victim of kind of them. They cut out the journey home for Stu and Tom Cullen. They just kind of, and really, like, that is a moment where both Stu and Tom Cullen are challenged a lot. Mm-hmm. And so by excising that, you're right. There's no obstacle for Stu to overcome, really. He's just kind of standing around, and then the plot happens. And then he's like, okay.
He's like the James Marsden of characters. He's like handsome and like attractive and smiling. You're like, yeah, like we can keep that guy around for sure.
Yeah, sure. There's one thing that this story did, that a big change from the book, that I wanted to talk to you about, because it's one of the, like, I am not the type of person that gets all bent out of shape about like adaptive choices. Like, you didn't tick all the boxes of my plot, and therefore I hate you. Like, that is not a big thing. But there's one choice that they made. It's the scene that you were talking about in the end of the first episode, where we see how the virus spreads. And in the book, and I believe in the original miniseries, what happens is a mechanical door just breaks, and the Campion, I think, is the name of the soldier who is able to escape, and that's how it spreads. Like, this mechanical door should have shut and locked, and it didn't, and so he got out and spread the virus. In this version, they made the choice to show that it's Randall Flagg's foot that holds the door open, and I think that changes so much of the thematics of the story to me. Like, to me, this was always a story about like the hubris of people, and how like this all-powerful civilization that is able to create this horrible destructive virus is done in by something as mundane and stupid as a faulty door. And to change it to like and Randall Flagg didn't cause this thing. He just like saw it happen and seized upon it as an opportunity to work his evil ways. And so to change it to where he's sticking his foot in the door and like he's the reason, I just like, that to me shows a misunderstanding of what the whole thing is supposed to be about.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like the story suffers from it not really defining what Randall Flagg is, or what he does, or what his powers are and what his limitations are. And that seems like a very, omnipotence in this one area, and then in like many others, caring what other people think about him. And maybe that's on purpose, but it's just a weird character.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about him is he's supposed to be kind of all bluster and talk, right? But he's actually like a chump. Like he relies completely on people's belief or fear of him, and if he doesn't have that, he just sucks. And that's supposed to be his thing. And I think, I mean, there are moments that I think this miniseries pulls that off really well. I think the ending manages to pull that off. It still did the literal hand of God thing, but I guess that's a good way to transition to talking about the show and how it handled Vegas, because this is one thing that I can just objectively say was just awful. What did you think? What did you think of the depiction of Vegas?
Yeah, it seemed like if we were writing Vegas when we were kids, when we had first seen The Stand. That's how we would have written it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then everyone's just going to be fighting, and it's going to be like the gladiators, and then having sex and like techno music, you know? It was just so dumb. I mean, I think the interesting thing about choosing good versus evil or whatnot, or making a stand, is it's complex, you know, and people are feeling these like different pulls. And it just felt like everyone there was a dirtbag. And also, even dirtbags wouldn't like want to stay there for a very long time.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it's weird, especially in 2021, to have like just decide that the way to depict evil is just sex. It's like, I feel like we've moved on from that. It seems like a very, very dated depiction, dated and, as you put, like immature and childish depiction of what evil is supposed to be. It also doesn't quite match what the Vegas in the book was. And I just don't understand why they did it this way. Is it like a complete lack of faith in the viewer so they need to just they need to just be quick and clear, and so they just say boobs and drugs and you get it, they're bad guys, you get it now, right? But no, I agree with you. Like, I think one of the most fascinating things about the story is who goes where and why, and why are they making those choices, and the temptation of those choices. This is something that I think the coda actually does a really fantastic job of, is it gives Franny a real difficult choice, and a choice that you make out of fear and uncertainty, to go to the bad side, because it's promising all this good stuff, and the good side is not necessarily promising all this good stuff. And I think that's a fascinating thing that the book does a varying level of skill in. I think that if I had some problems with The Stand, it's that I think we don't see enough of the characters get to make those choices, but certainly more so than this miniseries, which really, Harold, I guess, Nadine, I guess you saw like the choices she had, but it just felt like the show made it seem like Nadine never had a choice, that she was like destined to be Randall Flagg's, and so she wasn't actually actively choosing, she was just fulfilling her destiny, or her ka, or whatever.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the most interesting show of kind of like nuance, and the most interesting show of the villainy and kind of the character of Randall Flagg was in that coda, where like that's where it's scary, right? Where you're seeing someone come really close, like you think that she's kind of betrayed Stu and everyone, and then she doesn't. Like that's interesting, and that's scary, right? And so yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, you know, on the flip side, I think Mother Abigail was kind of the same thing. It was just like not an interesting character. It seemed to me very much just like, okay, this is all based on what God is saying, and like believe that, right? And then I'm out of here. And it was just not interesting or complex, or a choice that you feel like you would have struggled with, or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, other than the fact that they dreamed about her, I had a really difficult time understanding why people like stayed in Boulder and why they liked it in Boulder. And I think Mother Abigail is such a problem because Stephen King has admittedly said he has this problem with this magical Negro trope, of which Mother Abigail is a prime example of, and the show wanted to solve that problem. They wanted to take this character and make her more than that. And I think they even stated in interviews that's what they wanted to do. And I just don't, I think they tried to have their cake and eat it too. They tried to leave her the important magical voice of God character, and also try to not make her a prophet. Like, it was so weird. I don't know what they were doing with her, and I didn't get it. And I agree with you. There was nothing there for me.
Yeah. There was no, you know, like gathering where she says stuff or people learn from her. And it was just kind of an assumption that everyone else had similar dreams. And yeah, it wasn't there. Wasn't there.
And then even like, I think the coda like tries to do something with it by, we meet that little girl that's living in the cornfield, that's like maybe supposed to be her reborn. I don't know. Right. It kind of seemed like she was supposed to be related to Mother Abigail in some way. but I'm not sure how. I don't know.
At least she did something and said something and
Yeah,
helped the person make a tough choice or learn a lesson from what happened. Whereas I feel
sure.
like Mother Abigail was a total nothing burger.
Yeah, yeah. Which is, I mean, I love Whoopi Goldberg, and I know she loves this character and was so looking forward to playing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was very excited by that idea, and it just really bummed me out. I was just like, I for some stupid reason, I really hated that they all called her Mother A too. Like I don't like that is completely. I don't know why, but it just really bothered me. That it's like, what does Mother A think? I don't know. It just really bothered me.
Well, I feel like to do your co-host justice, like we have to find something to dig in and disagree on. So serve me up something here.
Okay. Let's see. Why don't we talk about some of the other characters? Let's talk about some of the side characters. Let's talk about we had some of the bad guys, right? We've talked a little bit about Harold, but let's talk about Lloyd, and let's talk about Nadine, and let's talk about Julie. So what did you think of these characters?
I mean, the Lloyd kind of birth of Lloyd story I thought was also pretty dumb. I don't remember what it was like in the book, to be honest. I might be just walking into your trap, but it's just like, who isn't going to, like, it's not very clear what he's agreeing to. And also like that scene was pretty vivid, just in the sense of, here's what it's like to be in a prison in a pandemic, right? I know that he's probably supposed to be bumbling and make mistakes and stuff, but he just felt super hapless in a way that no matter how, hollow Randall Flagg is supposed to be, like, there's no way that he's choosing that guy to be his right-hand man,
Yeah, it feels like his eighth choice, right? Like, it feels like he's gone around the world and asked everyone, and no one said yes until he gets to Lloyd, and he's like, all right, I'll take you. I mean, I liked the character when he was first introduced. The flashback where we see him and his partner hold up the gas station, and the other guy shoot someone, and Lloyd getting blamed for it. I kind of like that, and I like how that pays off in the end, where when he does kill Glenn, it's the first time he's ever killed someone. Although I don't believe that in this world. Like I don't believe in this world of just chaos Vegas that Lloyd never killed anyone up until the point where he shoots Glenn.
It doesn't make any sense. Yeah,
maybe, I don't know, but I agree. He's kind of like, I think he's very well performed, but I think he kind of gets too ridiculous. Yeah, I just never believed him as the second in command. I think that is his problem. It's like cartoonish kind of. It's like Shredder giving Bebop and Rocksteady like real instructions.
That's an amazing callback. I love it.
So, but what about the other ones? Nadine is such an interesting character, and I think we need to spend some time on her.
Yeah, I mean, I was just kind of surprised, and I'd love to hear a reflection on the book, reflection, so to speak, because that's kind of how she sees a reflection of herself, and that's it. Like, that's the thing that does it. Was kind of confusing to me. So what actually happened there?
So in the book, Nadine, everything with Harold kind of goes the same way. They leave. Harold is killed in a motorcycle accident on the way. I don't believe, like, in the series, they made it seem like Nadine did it. Like, it was Nadine that did it. I don't think that's what happened. I think he literally slipped on an oil slick. Like, there was no malice behind it. It was just like, this is just what happens when you fuck with the bad guys. Like, stupid, dumb shit's going to happen to you. But she gets assaulted by Randall Flagg. Right before they're about to have sex, she sees his true form and freaks out and tries to run away, and he doesn't let her. And then he rapes her, and then she's basically catatonic for the rest of the book. Like, she's just not around anymore. And then
that scene, by the way, was one of the few kind of scary moments where it seemed like the movie It, and it also kind of reminded me of a reverse Ghostbusters, like Rick Moranis and the the beast. Yeah. I mean, that was kind of scary.
Yeah, I enjoyed that scene. I think I was kind of waiting because I knew it was going to happen, or I thought I knew it was going to happen. And so they started having sex and it was normal. And I was like, oh, interesting. They're doing something different. And then it switches in the middle really hardcore. And it's very disturbing. But in the book, she kind of wakes up or has a realization near the very, very end. And like, instead, she doesn't kill herself. She like pisses off Flag so much that he throws her out the window, killing her. And like, he's furious about that because like, that's kind of, I think it's an important way of showing like how shitty Flag is actually, and how like much of a chump he is, that like this woman that is going to birth his son and the Prince of Darkness or whatever, is able to manipulate him into killing her just easily, but just by just pulling out a thread and pissing him off. It's this really interesting thing of exposing how weak and useless he is actually. So, I mean, I think that's better than what they did in the show. Just generally, like, I think why not just do that?
Yeah, what they did in the show just felt like he literally couldn't control. Like, you couldn't control anything. You know, you had to please him. It just didn't feel as though he had much power. Like, he could zap people, right? But that was pretty much it.
Yeah. And I didn't, the choice of like, making it so she looks all gaunt and white and also like fully pregnant. I mean, that was a cool reveal the first time she like looks, like we look at her, like she's, we're seeing her like walk from the hotel room down the elevator and to meet all of our other characters, and like we're seeing her look normal, and then the first time they see her she looks like totally different. That's a very shocking reveal, and I think that works very well. I just didn't understand it. I like her character. I just don't get it. I don't get it.
Did they like the dynamic between between Nadine and Harold was confusing to me. Did they like consummate the relationship in the book? I know it talks about how it's important to Flag that she doesn't, but it feels like she's teasing him and then he totally negs her and then he's like chasing after her again, which might be, you know, this like great kind of like sign function of attraction repulsion, but it was weird to me.
Yeah. She does not sleep with him or anything in the book. I mean, she's supposed to do a similar thing that she does in the miniseries, which is like kind of lead him on and egg him on into doing this. I think they went with like a clear incel narrative with Harold. And so I think, I think it actually works perfectly. It's a perfect way of taking a character from the early or late 70s, early 80s and kind of aging them up into modern times. Like I think that's exactly what Harold would be in the modern retelling of the story. But I think that maybe not complicated the Nadine relationship, but I think they were just trying to do something different with it. She was really just supposed to, he's really horny and she wants to coax him to do stuff with sex, but never giving him actual sex because she's saving herself.
Yeah. So that's my overall about Nadine. I think one of the confusing things to me was Larry on his kind of escape from New York, seems to kind of come upon 2 or maybe 3 similar type characters, and that was confusing to me.
Yeah.
Like the Heather Graham kind of cameo.
Yes, Heather Graham playing a character named Rita from the books, which the 94 miniseries cut out, maybe because they realized they didn't have enough time to get into that. Whereas this show chose to get into it, but do it on like 3 times fast forward to the point where you're like, what? A really weird choice. Really weird choice. I mean, Rita's a really interesting character in the story because like, she's like this woman that he meets in New York City and they fall in love kind of. They get out of the city together and then she can't take it anymore and she kills herself and Larry internalizes her death in a big way. It's part of his journey to becoming a better person, part of his journey from being this selfish song stealing drug addict to being a good person, is the responsibility he feels for her death. And I don't know, like it just happened so fast that you're not really sure what's going on. And I do think it is an interesting choice. My wife is the one that pointed this out because she was watching this with me and has never read the book or seen the other series. She honestly thought that Heather Graham's Rita and Amber Heard's Nadine were the same character because they're both blonde women in this series, whereas in the book and in the other series, Nadine is black hair with this very distinct gray stripe in it.
Yeah.
But so the first time we introduce those two characters, it's like it's part of this choice to cut back to flashbacks, and we kind of cut from a scene with Rita to a scene with Nadine like standing in the middle of a forest somewhere, and it is a little confusing because for a second they're like, wait, is that the same person? And I'm not saying Amber Heard and Heather Graham look alike. They don't at all. But just like I think the first time we see them as like from behind, and you just see her long blonde hair, and so you're just like, oh, that's the same person, and then it's not.
It was just kind of weird to me that if Larry was totally wrecked by what happened with Rita, it was just bizarre to me because like, oh wow, he's picked up another traveling companion and she's kind of exactly the same. Okay, I guess we're just continuing on now.
I don't know why the show chose to introduce Nadine and Joe to Larry in the same episode that it introduced the Rita stuff and introduced Larry. Like Nadine should have had her own episode, and like because you can kind of tell maybe in the early parts of the plotting and the structuring of the series, they thought, okay, like this is going to be the Harold and Franny episode. This is going to be the Larry and Rita episode. Yeah, this is going to be the Stu and Glenn episode. This is going to be the Nick and Tom episode. With Christ, we haven't even talked about Nick yet. And I think maybe somewhere along the line they like realized that, oh no, but we also have to do this to set up for this, and so they tried to fit other things into that general structure, and it just makes it a confusing mess. Like the more I think about the structure of the show, the more I dislike it because it just doesn't come together. It doesn't propel the narrative forward. And I mean, you can kind of realize that by episode 6, I think they've just completely abandoned the flashback structure to just tell the story going forward. And you're just like, part of me just wonders. I do think the team that was put in place here is a good one. And like, if you just gave the show 5 seasons and had like season 1 be like the fall of the world, and we meet all our major players and we spend a whole episode with each of our major players struggling through the end of the world, and then we kind of slowly bring them together, and then we do everything in bold, like you just give everything a little more time with all the people in place that we have making the show. I think it could have been something amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's what happens with series, and I'm stepping off into your land here, so I might, but like you have something like The Dark Tower, which is this huge epic, and then they try to tackle enough of it in one movie to give themselves permission to do the rest of it, and they fail. Whereas you have something like The Walking Dead, where it's like, I don't know what it's based on, but I'm sure it's, a pretty small premise, and they just kind of like build on that, and it goes on for a dozen seasons, right? And so it's hard to take something that's big and get permission to make it big, but it's easier to make something that's like small and then have it be successful and then just like build on it perpetually. I guess Game of Thrones is the opposite of that, but
But that's almost the exception that makes the rule. Yeah. Like I agree with that. I mean, I think the issue here is like if you're going to make one season of a TV show and like rolling the dice about hoping to get more, like how do you turn that first season of The Stand where we're just meeting our characters into something that feels like it has a beginning, middle, and end? And I just don't know. I just don't know how you would actually do that. But I mean, part of me wonders, like, Stephen King's one of the biggest names in the world, right? And he's had his adaptations, at least, have had a resurgence since the smash hit of the first It movie. And so, like, could you really not, like, is there no studio out there willing to throw money at this? I mean, I guess not. Like, I was talking to my co-host Matt a couple weeks ago about how, like, even if I had like $300 million to spend, I don't know if I would greenlight a Dark Tower series because I'm just not completely confident that would actually recoup its money. Like, I don't know how strong and how big the Dark Tower fandom is out there. And like, basically what we would need is The Stand to appeal to everyone. And I don't know if it can do that, but I mean, like, I think it can. I'm so torn on this.
I think if you can have The Walking Dead appeal to as many people as it did,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
mean, and Lost, right? Like, imagine pitching that concept and like, here are the dudes from Lost, and you know,
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think, I mean, you know how the book is arranged better than I do, but I think you could have an entire season. The conflict that goes on and like the simmering kind of plot around who's being called where, and just the concept of like walking down the road and getting to Boulder. That feels like there's a lot of stuff going on there to
Mhm.
have it be an entire season, I think. And
Yeah.
then the second season would be, kind of the two coming together. I mean, you kind of break it up like It did, even though I don't know that It needed to be two full movies, but
Well, it didn't need to be a terrible second movie, is what it didn't
yeah.
need to be. No, I think you're right. I mean, and I think one of the things that I love about the book so much is the exploration of this central theme of, we did this to ourselves, and as we try to rebuild, Boulder becoming basically us just trying to reboot everything and make all the same mistakes we made last time again. And that's something
Mhm.
that series like winks at the very end, because in the coda, because I think Stephen King understands his book maybe, and he wrote that final episode, and so you can see him kind of trying to squeeze every single thematic ounce of juice he has in this one episode he got to write. I think that's what is most interesting, is this idea of like, are we going to just do this all over again? Are we just going to rebuild civilization and it's just going to be just like we did it last time? We're going to make all the same mistakes and we're going to end up back here all over again. And I think a show that got like a season to explore that concept and dramatize that concept could be really interesting. And it kind of bums me out that we're just never going to get that.
I mean, they got to release this in the middle of an actual pandemic, and they still couldn't get people. And I get that the opposite argument is that, and this is the argument that my girlfriend kind of put forth to not watch the series with me, which is just, it's too soon, too realistic, too scary. I don't want to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like if you want to pique people's imaginations as to like what the cause of this, what the future of this will be, they had the golden goose,
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure that most of the writing and shooting stuff happened pre-COVID. So I don't think they could intentionally like craft a narrative around that. But I mean, the hook of a global pandemic that wipes out an entire population is so inherently fascinating, and they just kind of wanted to yada yada over it as quickly as possible. So yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think, gosh, I just like, the story is so amazing. The concept is so amazing. And I think that's something that Stephen King adaptations get wrong so much, is that they take this thing, like he has such good concepts, but it's not what makes him a great writer. Like, I just watched The Langoliers because we're doing a bonus episode on The Langoliers this week.
That's one of my favorite Stephen King movies.
Are you serious? It's terrible. It's terrible.
I just remember I mean, I can't imagine watching it now, but I just remember, I think about it every time I fly, like being stuck in an airport and those crazy, like, like visual balls that are like eating up the world. It's such a cool idea. I love it.
That's what I mean, is like, just the inherent idea of the Langoliers is so interesting and fascinating. And the adaptations like think they can get away with just, this is a cool idea, and they don't have to do any of the underlying character work, which is what I think makes Stephen King so successful, is the ability to get the interiority of these characters. And that's what his writing really becomes fascinating. He takes a really cool concept and mixes it together with some of the most engaging and interesting characters in the world. And the adaptation always feels like it could just get by on cool concept. And I think that's what The Langoliers does. And I think that's what a lot of the Stand miniseries does. It's just like, they're cool. I don't know about you, because we've both read and seen this before, but I can't imagine someone sitting down and watching this version of the story having nothing else of the Stand in their mind. I mean, my wife did that and she liked it. She thought I mean, she didn't love it, but she liked it. And I'm just like, I don't understand how you can follow what's happening, because it's like we barely spent any time with any of these characters. Like we joked about Nick earlier. Nick was one of my favorite characters from the book, and he's nothing in this show. He's like, he's barely there.
Yeah, it's not good. And the Nick character, I think, joins on to one of my least favorite characters, who's what is her name? Julie. Like when they meet in like that warehouse, and like it feels like all Julie wants to do is kind of be like nothing and just like seduce people and not give a shit about anything. I thought she was kind of like the new Vegas or whatever turned up to 11.
Sure. But here's why I liked Julie. Because I actually disagree with you on this one. So we're in a fight now. But there is a moment in that scene where she meets Nick and Tom Cullum. And there's a moment where like she's being an absolute jerk to them. And then they say, okay, fine, we're going to leave. And there's this moment of like actual real fear on her face. Like she's being abandoned. And she's
just
terrified.
Randomly shooting people.
Well, yeah. I mean, like there's a moment there where a better person would like recognize their fear and process their fear in a way that is productive and not violent and lashing out. And I think the actress does a very remarkable job of like selling like 10 different emotions that cross this woman's face in this moment where she's like, she actually wanted these people around. She wanted to be around people. She's desperate and lonely and wants to be around people. And she's a jerk, and so they walk off, and yes, her reaction to that is terrible, and she starts shooting them and being over the top. But I mean, there's that one moment kind of endeared me to that performance, and then they didn't do anything with that for the rest of the thing, and then she's just like that same person for the rest of the series, and that's. But I mean, like, I think in the moment I think one of the things you want to be able to see is why these people would join Flag, right? Like why. Mm-hmm. These people would be attracted to this place. And this is a person who is crude and rude. She says terrible slurs to poor Tom Cullum. She's awful. And like, she's probably a person who in her life hadn't gotten away with stuff like that before. And Randall Flagg invites her into a world where she can be someone important. The same thing with Lloyd, right? Like Lloyd is a failure. He is a failure of a person. And I think he even says in the series, like, it's time for people like you to be on top, right? This is an opportunity for the bottom of the barrel people to finally be in charge of things. And so there's some attraction to that. And I think in that one moment you do kind of see Julie, but on that aside, I agree with you. She's very one note from then on because she's New Vegas, and New Vegas is all one
note. Yeah, I mean, other characters love Tom. I thought Glenn was perfect. Greg Kinnear is the perfect person for that.
Oh my God. I loved his talking about like faith, right? I like the idea this whenever Stephen King writes about faith, it's some of the most fascinating things to read to me because he has such a complex understanding of what faith and spirituality and religion and all these things. He's got a very complex feeling about all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And I Glenn just being like, yeah, I've never believed any of this stuff, but like there comes a point where you like look around, you just have to like when God starts talking to you in your dreams, there comes a time when you just have to be like, okay, I'm in now. And Greg Kinnear pulled off that speech perfectly. He was so good.
How about Trash Can Man?
I hated him. I like Ezra Klein as an actor.
Ezra
Miller. Sorry. Who's Ezra Klein? Oh, Ezra Klein's a political guy. Yeah. Jesus. Too many podcasts. Ezra Miller. I don't know what they were doing with Trash Can Man. I like it's too much. It's too much. And there's no time for any of it. Like King devotes a lot of pages to Trash Can Man and understanding like where he came from and why he was the way he is. And again, this is another character where you understand why they would go to a person like Randall Flagg. Like he had a terrible, terrible childhood that scarred him for life. And we don't really get any of that in this. It's just Ezra just going to 11 for every scene he's in. And like, I don't know about you, I had to turn on, I couldn't understand what he was saying half the time.
I think I blacked out in like the middle 2 or 3 episodes of the series. And so I might not remember, but I feel like the only times he was there was like showing up and being like, go get the fire. And then he like
Yeah.
bumbles away and then comes back and lightning strikes and everything. I mean, there just wasn't any like why is this person scary to both the evil people and the good people? Like, why is he clearly like not really aligned to anyone? Like, why is he unreliable? You know, I mean, that stuff I think is interesting. And it was just
Yeah.
this like weird person that just like leaves and comes back, and then it was brutal.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I didn't understand. I mean, I will say that like him rolling in to the hotel, like his skin rotting off from the radiation poisoning, I thought that was pretty cool. But
like, but why? Why does the whole to Why?
Well, because I mean that's what happens in the book. He sets off the bomb.
I know, but isn't it just like random lightning? It's not him setting off the bomb. It's like,
yeah, well, that's a change that they made that I don't understand.
Yeah. It would make total sense if he set off the bomb, because he's like, go get the fire. Like, here it is. Boom. You know?
So, well, I mean, like in the book, it is an act of God that detonates the bomb, right? Like the hand of God comes down and detonates the bomb. Trash Can Man brings the bomb into Vegas. The hand of God comes down, sets off the bomb, kills everyone. But I do think part of me, as I watched the hand of God send lightning out that was disintegrating every bad person in Vegas, I was like, well, why do we need the bomb part then? Like, it seems like the lightning's got a handle on things. So yeah, I thought that was a little over the top. They just wanted this big climactic scene that they could like show all these characters disintegrate and show Randall Flagg get his ass kicked. But yeah, I mean, really all that happens is like the hand of God, poop, hits the bomb explodes, everybody dies. I think there's one interesting anecdote that I wanted to share that I heard on another show where like in the book, the three characters that are captured, Lloyd and wow, I forgot their names. This is sad. Not Lloyd. Larry and Ray when they're yeah, but Glenn's already killed at that point.
Gotcha.
When they're going to be crucified, right? In the book, they're actually just going to crucify them, and then the nuke comes and blows everything up. And in the show, they like had them slowly drown in this pool. And they asked the director of that episode, like, why the change? Why have them drown in the pool? And his response was literally just, well, there was this big pool in the middle of the set. It's just like, oh, okay. So there was no thought beyond that this would be a convenient place. Like, obviously crucifying has a pretty important symbolic gesture in this whole series. And no, we talk about people being crucified a lot in the series, but we never actually see any of it.
Yeah. And that, to your point about, you know, I kind of pictured it being more akin to, what's the movie where they're like living in the desert, like that kind of like autocratic, like rulership, right? Where, you know, deeds are punished and things, and like the crucifixion fits into that. Whereas here it was just like, why would they punish anyone? Everyone's just doing literally whatever they want to.
Yeah. I mean, in the book, it's supposed to be a fascist society. It's supposed to be like Randall Flagg is a fascist ruler who rules with an iron fist. You do anything wrong, he kills you. You do drugs, you're dead. Like, it's supposed to be this extremely right wing, like he tricks you by giving you what you think you want, but then fucks you over. And like, people are terrified and they're staying there because it's a place, but they're there completely out of fear. And like, they tried to do that with like him having the speeches given constantly throughout the city, right? Like, he's always on the screen, like talking, and like, I think they were trying to do a Trump thing. I really do. And I just don't think it worked at all. Yeah.
So speaking of the ending, what did you think of the ending, the coda, as you called it?
I loved it. I loved it. I mean, I think I'm trying not to just think it's because like the first time I didn't know what was going to happen, and so I felt there were real stakes. But like the moments, as you kind of hinted towards earlier, the moments where Franny is given the choice were like the first moments in the story that I really felt like what I was supposed to feel. Like I was really stressed out and tense about what was going to happen, because I think it's constructed beautifully. Like the stress of the situation, like she's on that top of that fucking well, and she's going to fall in, and like you really believe she's dying, and you're just like, okay, so she's gonna, like, is she gonna give in? Like I just thought that whole thing was beautifully constructed, and I thought it nailed the thematics of the show or the book. I thought it did everything it needed to. I thought that was far and away the very best episode of the entire show. And yeah, I'm a little biased because I know Stephen King wrote it, but
that's what I would love to not know that and have this discussion, because I do feel like everything just seemed tighter. I do like the kind of like Tolkien-esque or like Odyssey-esque, like, okay, so the movie's done, right? And then you're like, no, actually the most important kind of like, this is a thing that you're going to have to continue to think about and choose for the rest of your life, right? And like, what is life like after you kind of leave Boulder? And and then very much Kingian in the sense of, you're like, oh no, not a well with like a broken thing on the top of it.
Yeah.
You're like, no. And then you're like, but you totally get into it. You're like, yeah, that's, like, that's really scary. And so I think Randall Flagg, that part was amazing. I want to hear your perspective about his like jungle foray at the very end, which I'd forgotten about until I watched it again tonight.
Yeah, I mean, that's straight out of the book, right? That's the epilogue of the extended edition of the book, I think, where he just appears to a tribe of people who are totally cut off from the rest of the world and like makes them worship him. That's like the epilogue, like, ooh, evil's still out there moment. I'm fine with it. I felt like some of Randall Flagg's best moments are when he gets to go totally goofy, and I thought him making the gun with his fingers and then literally blowing the guy's head off was just like a really good touch, and I wish we got to see more of that Randall Flagg throughout the series. But I was fine with it.
This one didn't have a jean jacket. I think the jean jacket and the long flowing hair from the original was key to knowing you shouldn't take this guy fully seriously.
Sure. I mean, I think, my interpretation when I read the book originally was to link into the Dark Tower stuff, that this was not just another place on Earth. This, like, he's gone to another level of the tower. He's gone to another world, and he's going to just try his shit again there, because that's what he does. So this kind of made it seem like this was the same planet, same world. And I get the reasoning for that, because like that's too confusing to explain to a general audience, this whole Dark Tower nonsense. I do think Dakota had some really great Dark Tower references in it, though. I don't know if I noticed those. So, I mean, Mother Abigail doesn't come right out and say Ka is a wheel, but she basically says Ka is a wheel. Totally. There's also a moment where like they tell the things that Franny is told is be true, stand, and that is literally
Gunslinger
in the final pages of the Dark Tower. And I only know this because we were reading that section for the podcast right when this episode came out, but that's literally what, like, as spoilers for Dark Tower, as Roland walks through the final door, he's basically told, like, there's hope for you yet. There's hope for redemption as long as you stand and are true. So like, that's literally like quoting almost the final lines of that story. So yeah, I mean, it was fun.
I think that, to try to be somewhat critical here and not be a total Stephen King fanboy, I feel like the Amazonian tribe thing, like, you're already struggling with having casted, all of the like male like all the characters, the main characters are male. In the book, I think they're all white. And then like you have the Mother Abigail character, like, just don't have him go to like an Amazonian tribe. I mean, you could redo that in a little way just to show that you're kind of like progressing a little bit.
Yeah.
And not like have people focus on that. So I kind of like wish you could have found a better way to do that. But
yeah, I mean, that's like, Stephen King is a man of the best intentions. And I think he just does stuff like that. Like, even this episode, like, he's acknowledged that he has a problem with the way he writes black people. And then in this episode, he writes a little black magical girl, right? Like, it's just like, I'm not I was interested in the character. I understood the symbolism of it, but it's just like, you're just going to double down, huh, buddy? You know?
Yeah, but I definitely love the episode.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of broke my heart a little bit because part of me saw what the whole show could have been in this one episode. And I was like, oh man, we could have had something really, really great. And we didn't. I mean, I think the way I most look at the series and the way I'm going to continue to look at the series is it is basically a series of vignettes from the book The Stand, which are sometimes very good and sometimes don't make any sense to me at all. And that's how I'm going to treat it. Like, there are moments that we didn't really harp on them, but there are moments in this thing that I really loved where you have characters having these wonderful conversations. Everything with Stu and Glenn, just amazing. Harold kind of going through his journey, really, really great. There are individual bits and moments of this thing that just blew me away, but the overall story just doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Speaking of what you said about kind of Stephen King writing the episode, do you know, I mean, I've read obviously a bazillion articles about it, but it just seems like he doesn't want to get involved with film adaptations. Has he written any other episodes or screenplays of his stuff, or is he totally just not?
He does on occasion. There's actually the story. I don't know if you ever read Lisey's story. That's a novel that he came out with in 2006. And he calls it his favorite book. It's one of his most personal stories, he said. And Apple TV Plus is making an adaptation of it. And he has written every single script. I think it's a 8-episode series premiering later this year on Apple TV Plus. And he wrote them all. And it's going to be directed by Pablo Larraín. So I'm extremely excited for it. So, I mean, I think like throughout the years, he's dabbled intermittently with writing and doing stuff for his adaptations. I mean, like, he is like notoriously like positive about any adaptation. Like, I think the only exception to that is The Shining is the only thing he's like publicly said he doesn't like.
Which is so funny, right? Because it's like one of the most successful.
Right. I mean, like, he said the Dark Tower movie was amazing. I think he just like, look, he is a very good writer. He's also a very savvy businessman, and he knows that he puts his stamp on these things, they'll do better, and people will come to him and want to make more of his stuff. I think, to be completely crude about it, I think he just gets it. And so I think he just wants people to continue making adaptations of his stuff because he likes the money he gets from them. And he's also, I think it's just fun for him to see how different people interpret his work, even if they don't always do it successfully.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, I think it's kind of like the opposite of Alan Moore, The Watchmen, right? Like, he gets joy out of seeing folks take his universe and have it come to life. I mean, I think he gets that the coolest thing about the universe that he's kind of created is that lots of folks kind of come into it and have their own creative license with it, and it'll live way beyond him, right? And I think the Castle Rock series to me is a great example of that, where it's just like not, I mean, I only watched the first season, but it's not really anything specifically Stephen King, but it's so clearly everything Stephen King, and it's done really, really well, you know?
I wasn't as big of a fan as the second season of that.
I think you're the reason I didn't watch the second season.
No. Well, I mean, I think you should give it a shot. I mean, like, I forgot the name of the actress but she's doing an incredible Annie Wilkes interpretation. It's so good. I kind of wanted to ask you, because, you know, you're obviously hosting this thing, so you don't get interviewed that much. But for the person like myself, I think I read, was it Dreamcatcher? I think Dreamcatcher was the most recently published Stephen King book I read, and that was probably in college. Oh, wow.
So I haven't read any of his new stuff. Like, what would you say to the fallen out kind of Stephen King fan or the new Stephen King fan? Like, what should you read in the past 15 years of Stephen King?
Oh my gosh. His career has been really interesting in the past 15 years. If the last thing you read, that's so long ago. I think that book, Dreamcatcher, which was Not a very good book. One of his worst books. Came out in 2000. So you're 20 years behind, man. Yeah, 2001 that book came out. So I think 11/22/63 is a very, very good book. That's the one. That's the Kennedy assassination one.
Yeah, I actually saw the series on a plane one time.
Yeah, that's the Franco one, right? I don't remember much about it other than I thought it was okay.
Yeah, that was a cool idea.
Lately he's been really into like mystery, like murder mystery type detective stories. Like he did. I know you've watched the Mr. Mercedes series, or at least you know about it because I remember you sending me something about it when it first came out. But
that's Google serving it up to me.
He did this whole thing called the Bill Hodges Trilogy, which is a series of books, Mr. Mercedes, Finders, Keepers, and End of Watch, which is basically him doing mystery, but with a supernatural bent to it. And I think all three of those are really, really good. And he's liked that because he's kind of gone back to it several times. In 2018, he released a book called The Outsider, which is kind of in that same universe. And then one of his short stories in last year's If It Bleeds was a continuation of that same world. So he obviously likes writing those. He keeps going back to them. So I would check out those. Revival is a very good book that was going to be made into a movie, but isn't. I don't know. I mean, it's all been good. Like you can tell he's older, right? You can tell he's chilled out a little in some ways, and he's never going to change in other ways.
I guess I don't care too much about, I mean, I'll give them a shot. I just don't care too much about crime books. Like I remember reading, what was the one that the preface to Mr. Mercedes was like From a Buick 8 or something where,
yes.
And I was just like, it's getting a little bit too like 1950s sleuthy. And I wasn't excited about that.
Hey, From a Buick 8 came out after Dreamcatcher. So
yeah, I'm looking at the thing now. I mean, it's all in the same, because I read him through when he finished The Last Dark Tower. So that was 2004 or 5.
Yeah. So have you've read?
No, I guess 12.
Well, I mean, he finished The Dark Tower in 2004, and then The Wind Through the Keyhole is like the follow-up book.
Yeah.
So you've never read that one?
No, I read The Wind Through the Keyhole, but
okay.
But
that's
no, I didn't read
Dark Tower.
Yeah, exactly. So, but you said Lacey's what's its face?
Lacey's Story is his favorite book. Yeah, I liked that one. I'm going to be reading it again soon.
These aren't glowing reviews from you. You're not being like, oh man, you should, like, in the past 20 years, like, this is an amazing book.
I mean, like, I'm just trying. I don't want to overset your expectations. I mean, like, my favorite King books are not from the last 15 years, but I still think he's very good. Like, I think Under the Dome is a very classic Stephen King doorstop novel where it's just this huge book about this town and so many characters. Like it's just him doing his thing, and it's not the best version of him doing his thing, but it's pretty good. It's a pretty good read. I think 11/22/63 is probably one of his best books, honestly. At least of the last couple decades. It's very good. And then this is a controversial opinion, I think, but I really, really liked Dr. Sleep, the follow-up to The Shining. I really liked that book.
I saw that movie.
The movie's incredible.
Yeah, that was great.
But I really liked the book as well. But the movie's like fantastic. What
is your favorite Stephen King short story?
That's not fair. I don't have all of them open in front of me. I really love The Raft.
I don't think I read that.
I can't remember which one that is in now. But it's one where just kids are trapped on a raft in the middle of a lake in winter, and there's a monster in the water, and it slowly picks them all. It's fucking amazing. It's on Skeleton Crew. I really like that one. I really like, I don't know. I'm trying to look through them all very quickly. The Jaunt is another really good one. That's like a kind of super sci-fi one.
I had to give, I had the pleasure of giving a Stephen King short story collection to one of our second cousins. So Matthew's kids, who are getting into reading fiction. I was like, oh, you got to take these books. And I couldn't give, what is the collection that has The Mist in it? I couldn't find it.
That is Skeleton Crew.
Oh my God. I think that's and talk about a movie that's just had multiple like failed attempts at launch. How many times can you try to make that movie and have it suck?
No, the Frank Darabont version of The Mist is really good.
What?
Yeah. That's the one that ends with the best ending in history.
What is it?
Spoilers for the ending of the Frank Darabont version of The Mist, but they give up and he shoots his son in the head, and then 5 seconds later the government shows up and everyone's fine.
You're right. That was like the ultimate kick in the pants. You're like, you made it all the way through and you're like, no freaking way.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that's a fun movie. The TV series version of The Mist is terrible. They made a TV show.
They made 2 TV shows, didn't they?
I can't even keep track. I don't know. You got to. So there's another show called The Fog, and you got to. It's not the same thing.
Is it based on Stephen King or is it?
I don't think so.
Lawnmower Man was awesome. I would just like have dreams about that. The Walking Man. Aren't they making a Walking Man? Or The Long Walk. What's it called?
Yeah.
That's
The Long Walk.
Awesome.
They're making a movie about that. And that's one of my favorite King books, honestly. That's a Bachman book he wrote, but it's fucking so good.
I remember loving the Bachman books. Like, was it Desperation and The Regulators? Or one of them was Stephen King, one was Bachman?
Yeah, Regulators was Bachman, Desperation was Stephen King.
Oh, so weird.
That was his 90s experimental stage where he's just like doing crazy shit. Because I remember those covers that matched up together. I thought that was the coolest fucking thing in the world.
Yeah. But I think my all-time favorite, I mean, not my all-time, but like, you've read On Riding, I assume?
Oh, yeah, like 5 times, yeah.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I just love how, I feel like had Stephen King gotten hit by a minivan and not survived, like, I just don't, even though I don't think his books since then have been obviously as good or as like centered in the kind of cultural zeitgeist, somehow that continued production, I think, made him like the writer's writer in a way that, like, you know, I don't think a lot of writers would say that they like read Stephen King, but just the fact that he's continued to write and be so prolific, and the fact that that book is so good on writing.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that's a work of genius, that book. And I mean, I love the way The Dark Tower ends too. I mean, I just spent like 5 hours talking about this the other day, but I think what he does with that series post accident is brilliant and personal and deeply moving to me. And that's like, I always loved him as just like, it's fun to read these books. And then I think it was reading the ending of The Dark Tower that made me really love him as just an artist. Like, I think he's brilliant. But yeah. One more thing about The Stand before we go. Yeah. They took out the Lincoln Tunnel. And it sucks.
Brutal. I thought the sewer scene was just weird. It was like too. It
sucked.
It was too like, I don't know. The Stand, I feel like, is weird because it doesn't need to have a bunch of supernatural. Obviously, Stephen King is always going to toss it in there to some extent. Mm-hmm. It doesn't need to have extra supernatural besides the fact that like Randall Flagg exists, and just have this like weird bump in the night thing in the sewer. I don't know, just like, I still think about that tunnel scene when I go like drive through the Lincoln Tunnel or any tunnel.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I mean, like the scene in the 94 miniseries is pretty good. The book, like, it is actually very rare that I get scared while reading. Like, it just doesn't happen to me very often. And that is one of the scenes that terrified me while reading. Like, it terrified me. And I was so disappointed they cut that out. And I don't understand the reason for the change. I mean, the reason is probably money, but I don't know. That was all I had. I'm done complaining about The Stand now. Did you have anything else?
No, I think that, you know, I still think that even though obviously they wrote the movie and shot the movie before the pandemic, I think that I enjoyed a couple awesome books that were kind of, about pandemics that were published before the pandemic. Severance and this book called Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, both of which I highly recommend, especially the latter. Station 11 is about like a Shakespearean acting troupe that tours through like the Midwest after a pandemic kind of kills mostly everybody. And they end up in like an airport, and it just is like this Stephen Kingian universe kind of thing where they end up in an airport, which obviously makes me think of the Langoliers. And I just think there was like so much stuff that I think was good and hit on pandemics and made the pandemic even more chilling, if that was a thing that anyone outside of Stephen King fans even needed. And so I'm just kind of disappointed that it didn't take that, like the zeitgeist, and become like a thing that people also remember. Like this was the media that we kind of consumed through it. So I don't know.
Yeah. No, I get that. I think it would have been. I mean, obviously they couldn't predict the future, but if it had embraced or explored that material in a way that impacted people in the middle of this past year, I think it would have been very, very important and wonderful. And you're right that it just really wasn't interested in doing that. I need to check those books out. I think you've recommended one to me already, and I haven't read either of them, but I'm writing both those down.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll have lots of time to sit and read, and you won't be tired, once you have a child here in the next couple of weeks.
Look, man, everyone tells me that the first few months, like, you do have a lot of time because you have no life except for being at the whim of the kid every 3 hours or so. So you just have a lot of time to sit around waiting for the kid to start crying. So I do expect to do a lot of reading within the next few weeks.
Awesome. Yeah, I highly recommend it. And appreciate the opportunity to be on here. Looking forward to doing it again sometime.
Yeah, it was so fun to have you on. I really wanted to talk about the show with someone, but my co-host I can't do it yet. And one day Matt will watch the Stand miniseries and be as disappointed as us. He's going to be watching the Dark Tower movie in a few weeks. Man, it's going to be
Can you live really stream fun. That? Like a video of like just his expressions while he's watching
just his face. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Also, thank you so much.
You really got to work on making a person feel good, because I keep being like, man, this is awesome. And you're like, well, yeah, well, my co-host couldn't join. So it's kind of fine that you're here.
No, I'm just explaining why Matt, the people love Matt. They love Matt, and they love his whole, I've never read a book of Stephen King, so let's read the Dark Tower. So I'm just explaining. It was wonderful to have you on. Thank you so much for doing this. And yeah, hopefully we'll have you back sometime to talk about some more Stephen King things. Maybe I'll sit you down and have you explain to me why you like the Langoliers. I want you to rewatch the Langoliers and explain to me why this is actually a good movie.
We could do an on writing or books about writing episode if I ever get this book out of me.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, yeah. Why don't we take the moment to kind of plug yourself, because you do things too, right?
If you've made it this far in us talking about Stephen King and our childhood, then you might be interested in a book I'm writing about sabbaticals. So yeah, I took a sabbatical in my prior life, was an entrepreneur, and did that and burnt out, and then had some things I wanted to do that took more than the 1 or 2 weeks of vacation we get as Americans. And so yeah, writing about the phenomenon of taking extended leave and what people learn and what role it should have in the future of work.
Awesome. I am looking forward and you're not just writing a book, you're doing research, right? Or research is being done around this thing.
We did research about sabbatical takers, and yeah, it's really fascinating. I mean, I think that the short story is that I think especially as Americans, but from my work in emerging markets, people in India, people in Indonesia and China, they're not looking to the culture of work in France or Sweden as how to like get ahead in the world. They're looking at the States, which means all the problems we have with burnout, dissatisfaction with work, switching jobs all the time. That's coming for the majority of humanity if it's not there already. But there's a lot of societies like Australia where every civil servant gets long service leave, which is a legacy from, British colonists having to have a long time off in order to go back home, and sail back to the UK. But that's a benefit that's stayed throughout, centuries, right?
Yeah.
everything from the US military to prestigious consulting firms that have long extended time off, greater than 2-3 months built into kind of the way people work. And those are, obviously very successful organizations. So how can we as individuals and companies allow and enable people of all kind of socioeconomic backgrounds to take extended time off? What's the longest you've ever taken off in a row, like intentionally?
Intentionally? Probably no more than a week at a time, maybe a week and a half. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's as you know, it's a totally different ball game when you're like looking for a job. That's not fun. You're not getting to like do things you've always wanted to do and that kind of stuff. But that's crazy, right? I mean, you're about to have your first kid, and you will have never given yourself more than a week or two at this, in a row to do something that you wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's not okay.
No, it's kind of crazy. Yeah. I think that's really fascinating because, I mean, it's like, it's our problem, but it's going to be a lot of people's problems. Yeah. I mean, we're dealing with the truth of like maternity leave right now, which is that our country is like one of 4 that doesn't give paid maternity leave. Like my wife works in a school system and they have no paid maternity. She's using all her vacation. I mean, they'll give her the time off, right? They'll give her up to 12 weeks off, but they don't pay her. She has to use her sick time, or like she can take some short-term disability, but it's like a fraction of her paycheck. Like it's
like the fact that you have to like taking time off for to bring a human into the world, which is a thing that if not most of us will experience in our lives, like all of us were that at the beginning of our lives. You have to take disability leave.
Yeah.
Like not celebration of this shared gift of creating humanity leave, but you are disabled. Technically, I guess you're disabled. And so we kind of have to give this to you.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Sad stuff. So yeah, that's why I'm out there writing. I mean, I've just heard so many stories about folks who've had transformational experiences, getting to, pursue things that they really want to. And so that's what we're doing. You'll hopefully read about it soon.
Awesome, man. Thanks again for coming on. And I hope everyone enjoyed this episode, and hopefully we'll be back to finish up The Wind Through the Keyhole or whatever book. I don't know when this is going to come out because this is going to come out when the baby comes. So I have no idea what section of the book we're on, but
don't worry, constant listeners, Matt will be back and DJ was just a fluke.
That's not what I'm saying. That's you. That's your stuff. That's not me.
Good luck out there.